Okay, we are on air. This is the LTS working group for Node for August 8th, 2016. We're going to jump right on into the agenda. First item being backporting fs make temp to v4x. I'll drop the issue number into the chat. So it's issue 7714. Do we have any thoughts on this? I know, Rod, you kind of weighed in on it a little bit.
Yeah, my preference would be to not add this. I don't see the reason to do it, but I'm not going to hold it up if somebody feels that it needs to go in.
You're really quiet, by the way. Yeah, my feelings are pretty much the same. I don't really understand why we would backport this. The buffer APIs were backported so that people could migrate off of them for security reasons. There hasn't really been any security reasons to migrate to fs.makeTemp as far as I can see. And yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Me three.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
One
thing, sorry, James, you were going to say?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that we could mention in that issue that may be reasonable would be that like part of the reason for making this decision is because of how late into the LTS cycle we are. That like if we were really early into V6, for example, that may be something that would be considered. We could also not mention that.
I'm not sure it would be. I think we'd be probably having the same discussion if we were at the beginning.
Okay.
Because it's just adding features. I don't know if there's anything compelling about this that is, makes it special.
Okay. I think we're correct. There's sense here. So unless somebody can come up with like a really good argument why this needs to be there, like the issue, we just say no, right? Okay. So the next one is issue 7676 in the main repo. Is exporting OpenSSL symbols on Windows V4X. Let's see. I believe this was, Ben's.
Yeah, I can speak to this one a little bit. Ben submitted this. It was a bug that has been existing. It's like one of those oldest time problems that has been going on for Windows users being able to write native modules on top of OpenSSL. It seems like overall it is a win, but I do believe that there were some potential regressions when it originally landed, although it did appear that a lot of those problems that arose were potentially due to people using the interface wrong, rather like it was like a userland error. That being said, I mean, if it is going to break stuff and it's not going to add, like, I mean, do we necessarily want to give people more of a reason to stay on 4 now that 6 is going to be going LTS? Do we want to maybe have that as a reason to move to 6?
Yeah, and when you say it was people using the API, like, is that new users or that somehow existing users got messed up by it?
So it broke some natively compiled modules, if I remember correctly. Ben posted a bit of a postmortem. I'm going to just post a link to that, where he just kind of did a short overview of kind of what happened there. So add-ons not leaking against the bundled OpenSSL on Windows forever. He put together a smoke test in April. He chipped away at the problem, and about a month ago, it was fixed and landed in v6.3. Add-on breakages were reported a couple days later, but it was probably a configuration issue in the add-ons exposed by one of the changes, and has some notes about where that happened and the issues where those were happening. So there's the possibility, that we could be breaking some code, but that could be, code that's working that shouldn't be. So I'm kind of on the fence about this.
We have done the code that's working but shouldn't be thing at least in the stable before. What's the argument for landing this? I mean, like, I'm not a huge fan of maybe breaking stuff in LTS.
Yeah, so it's basically that add-ons don't link against the bundled OpenSSL on Windows.
Oh, right.
But yeah, like as I was saying before, this seems like a good reason to push people to move to 6 instead of keeping them on 4. And to me, my gut is saying it's better to keep something broken in an expected way instead of breaking it in an unexpected way.
Yeah, and I don't think,
Yeah, I agree.
I haven't seen any major people yelling and complaining that it's, I mean, it sounds like it's been broken forever, and maybe people are unhappy, but it doesn't seem like there's some new urgency to fix it and land it now, right?
Yeah, that's my feeling exactly.
And this is working in 6, right? It's not sitting in master.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It landed in 6.3.
If there's a non-zero risk that it could break people in ways we're not quite sure, then I would say no. Let's not do it.
And I think the answer is there must be non-zero because it did break a few people.
Perhaps something we could try to do though is, if we know of some of these that did break, were impacted by updating it in 6.3. If we could do a test build with this and run some tests on those to see if there's any problems, anything obvious. But I mean, we would need somebody to do the work, and I'm not sure.
I'd assume that those would just work now. In theory, we fixed them up from 6.3, right? So
Yeah, in theory. So.
Keep in mind that people can also have internal add-ons at companies, so that might not be on NPM. So we could break stuff there unintentionally.
So what broke was an internal stuff. It was a project using a native add-on where libcurl was used, and so they build with the node headers, and then got linker errors due to duplicate symbols that they didn't have before.
right. So almost anybody who's worked around the old issue might run into that issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it almost seems like if you cared about it, you might actually get hit with the change.
Yeah, that makes it a bit more tricky. So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking we err on the side of just being more cautious and just leaving it as it is right now.
Yeah, it's living in 6. I mean, my gut's telling me anyone who worked around this has it working in 4, right? And then when they move to 6, we can make sure to maybe make it really clear about this in the changelog notes or in something when we move to LTS. But yeah, kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, so maybe it's we should comment on the issue like that, and then ask Ben if there's any, if there's a real strong case to be made, because we're not seeing it yet, and we think the risk is it's better not to take the risk.
I think that's a good idea. Jeremiah, Rod, any other thoughts from you on this?
No, I like Miles's philosophy here of keeping it broken in an expected way, but again, it's hard to form a strong opinion on this.
It's worth adding to that like this backport was made as part of like me just auditing things that sounded like they might be useful. And in Ben's comment itself, he said to be determined if it should be backported. So he was not like adamant that this is something that necessarily needs to be done.
I will. Ooh, was this done in V5 or was it done in V6 proper?
V6 proper. It landed in 6.3.
I don't have a note on it in the V5 to V6 breaking changes I just see. So I will add one in there.
Okay. Yeah, it came in as a minor change, and I think that the breaking was unexpected, and the breaking was like mostly configuration related.
I think we're in a general consensus. We can drop a note into the issue just saying, hey, if there is a case for backporting this, please please make it. But for now, we're going to leave it as is. Sound right?
Sounds right to me.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Next one, this is in the Node LTS repo, issue number 124. To backport the node underscore module underscore version to V4X. I think this is another one from Ben. Or no, Miles, you open it.
Yeah, I opened this. I want to push that we should consider it. I don't know that it. I guess like we're not going to necessarily be changing the node module version, but it was just. I'm trying to look back at the original one, but it just had to do with like how JIP works, and if we have node module version in both versions, it should be more consistent. I guess Rod could maybe talk more to the effect this would have on JIP and if it would simplify things once 0.10 and 0.12 go end of life.
Sorry, I'm just looking it up. I, yeah, I commented somewhere. I don't know where it is. Maybe it was on the original issue that I don't actually see the value in this, but other people seem to. So I'm not going to dismiss that. I just um, this number is predictable across versions, and they're wanting it to test for ABI, and there's other ways to do that. I don't know. It's not a big deal as far as I'm concerned, but some people seem to find it useful. Actually, no, okay, where I did comment, I think, was in the backport to 0.10. That's where I commented, which was saying that you could just hardwire something into 0.10 and 0.12. But others have said otherwise. Okay, no, I really can't muster a strong opinion on this.
The one thing that I know, we have had a regression in the past. Something got added to process.config. It had to do with one of the FIPS mode checks. Now it was since refactored, but we fixed it in V4 because we were depending on a process config check, and userland code completely overwrites that, and we have no control over it. And I'd have to say is, I don't have an objection to adding this. We just have to make sure that none of our code actually depends on it, because of that.
I think the use case for this is all about build time. So if you're building an add-on, you could test this, and so using it during runtime in an application is probably not very likely. Although you never know what people are going to do, but I doubt there would be ways that this would be like any overriding would be a problem.
But you're saying, Rod, that number is always unique for a major version, like 4, 5, or 6.
Correct.
I guess and it never changes between the life of those.
Nope.
Okay.
Which was my argument for backporting to 10 and 12. We're already seeing this in userland where people are hardwiring in things for those versions just because they're old. We did it in Node.js even. If it's 0.10 or 0.12, you don't make assumptions. You hardwire things. But okay, so to revise what I was saying before, my soft objections were backporting to 0.10, 0.12. People have found a use for this in userland for build systems, and maybe it will come in useful for something like Node pre-JIP. So it doesn't have to even inspect the node binary. It can just look in the config that comes in the headers. So there's obviously potential use for there to make the binary story a bit nicer. And if that's the case, then that's work we should encourage, I guess.
Right, yeah. I mean, so if it's not going to use at runtime, if it does make things easier, I can't see a harm to it then.
I mean, and are people asking for the backports to 10 and 12? Like, would we backport it to 4 and maybe just leave it at that?
Yeah, issue number 7808 on Node.js Node is oh, hang on, sorry, that's what we're discussing, isn't it? Oh no, we're discussing. Sorry, yeah, 7808 is it's got a question in it about backporting, and myself, James, and Ben have responded to that. I don't know if that was actually processed yet, but the suggestion, the dangling suggestion was to go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think I'm just landing on the same thing. I just don't see the harm in it. I don't see the overwhelming benefit, but I don't see the danger. So.
Yeah, it seems pretty low risk, so read on that front.
Are there any objections to backporting it before? Okay.
I don't really have an opinion on this.
Well then, why don't we just okay? So this is. Okay, why don't we just we'll note it here. I don't know if there's an open PR for actually doing the V4 backport, so we'll just note it in the issue. And go from there. Okay. All right. So the next issue is managing floating V8 patches. I was hoping Ali would be here for this. I suggest we defer this until we can have a call with Ali on to update some of the status on this.
I managed to have a good conversation with Ali at Node Summit and can just give an update based on that.
Okay.
The last that we talked, it sounded like, after the previous LTS meeting, The conclusion was it didn't really make sense to rely on the Google infrastructure for building things and for running the CI tests. Their infrastructure moves too fast and aren't really supporting older versions of V8. So it sounded like what their team would really like to see would be a V8 fork. I actually believe ended up getting set up at Node.js /V8 now.
It already exists, yep.
And so Ali and I were talking briefly about the idea of making some automation tools to simplify the backporting process. So things would get backported to the V8 branch, the V8 fork that we have, and then the tools could be used to update the V8 that exists inside of Node and also take responsibility for bumping the patch. Because right now, bumping the patch is kind of getting conflated into each individual bump to V8 that we make. So I think the idea would be that we would be able to land a couple different patches onto the release line, and then, prior to a V4 release, we could, update everything in a single patch. That was kind of like the high-level thing we were talking about. I'm not 100% how far Ali was imagining the tools could go, because the tools could, be involved from everything from code review all the way down in the way in which, depot tools are really, and the scripts inside of the V8 repo are really kind of take over everything there, versus just a single script to update V8. I would, defer to Ellie to update us on that.
Okay. That's pretty much kind of a wait and see how it evolves. But Ollie,
Yeah.
Ollie's thinking.
And I've offered to support him. It sounded like he was going to put together a document. It sounded like he had some vacation or some stuff that was getting in the way too. I'll reach out to him this week and see where he's at. And for the next LTS meeting, we should have something more concrete.
Right. Okay. Anyone have any concerns, issues with that? Cool. All right. So let's see. I'm just going to write this down. Follow up with update next LTS file. Okay. So those are the end of our originally scheduled agenda items. We have 3 additional items, or 4 additional that were added. First one being status update on V4.5. Miles, do you want to give us?
Yeah, I've been using V4.5 locally on my machine for the, since I cut the RC2. I've not had any problems, like not a single one that I've managed to find. I got to grab Isaac's ear at NPM camp very briefly and made sure that he was very aware of all of the things that were going on with landing, like libuv 1.9 and, that we've covered all the edge cases. Also sent out an email to the CLI team, so, very strong communication there. As far as I know, they've tested it and said there weren't problems. We've run, extensive Canary in the Gold Mine tests without any problems. Julian said that some customers of his were using it in staging and not seeing some problems. I know that I had some conversations with Bryce about, some of the internal conflicts that NodeSource was having, but it didn't seem like it was going to be a massive issue, and I'm going to double check the timeline and make sure that they're not getting blocked on anything. Michael, has IBM been testing this internally at all?
Yeah, we've built the last couple of release candidates, and nobody's reported any issues to me. So.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much ready for a release. I think we could do it tomorrow, but it might be better to do a signal to the community that it's coming out in a week, and do the release cut off of where we're at right now next Tuesday, if anyone doesn't have any objections.
That sounds good to me.
Works for me.
Sounds good.
Okay. So the signaling, how do you want to do that? Miles, what do you envision?
I would likely tweet it. I'll write Tracy to see that the Node.js Twitter can retweet it. I can check in with Tracy as well and see if the foundation would like to write a blog article or anything more to promote it. That's kind of what I have off the top of my head, but I'm open to other suggestions.
That works. Jeremiah, are you gonna? You've been doing the like the release posts, right? You do those for the LTS releases also.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have that also. Cool. Jeremiah, I know you were the one that brought up the one in the update. Did you have any specific thoughts?
Nothing in particular. I just wanted an update on it. That was it. Because I didn't really know where the status was at this point. And hopefully anyone that watches would probably also be interested in that because it's a core bit of LTS.
Right. Okay. So anything else on 4.5? Rod, Michael?
Nope.
All right. Code name for V6. Yeah. We do have issue 118 open for this. We got them down to, Rod, you had suggested barium, berkelium, beryllium, bismuth, thorium, boron, or bromine.
I still think we should drop it.
One thing that was brought up that I think is worth considering is picking words that are easy to pronounce and easy to understand by non-English speakers. I think that's something that we should optimize for.
Jeremiah, I definitely see the argument for dropping it. Would note, I mean, that some of the folks like the Docker group and like NVM, they're actually making use of those code names for differentiating between the different LTS versions.
Is there any reason not to use the version for those? As in V4, V6, V8, V10, etc.?
I think it just comes down to I think it was more kind of a user friendliness. Being able to have a label is more friendly than having a version number. I don't know if it's a functional difference, but yeah,
But besides like our own naming of nsolid, I can't really find a reason that isn't like somewhat confusing and not really deterministic as to why we would have names instead of just using the versions. Because at some point or other, like people are going to forget which one's what. It's inevitable, but like the version's a lot more tied to what that actually is and where it is on the timeline.
what do you think, Rod?
I've continually made my thoughts clear on this, that we've done one release with a name. I think that naming is helpful and good and raises the profile of LTS. And if we're going to do any dropping, then let's do it after we've had experience with more than one with a name.
Last year, the recollection I have is that we would do it and try it with one release.
That's not my recollection. I don't find any evidence of that either. I went through this in that issue, trying to look at the evidence of what we discussed, and even that call that we had the recording of it doesn't have that.
Yeah, I don't remember that either. I'm saying it would only be one. Current LTS plan says that we would have it. We have some time between now and October. We don't set it now.
What I do recall, and what is in that the last discussion, was that we would have this discussion again after the release because the objections came up a week before LTS was to be cut. So let's have this discussion later on. So we're having the discussion again, but it wasn't a commitment to revisit dropping it. It was we can discuss the objections, just not a week before we're going into it.
I mean, we've tried it for one release. What's the major benefit of trying it for 2 releases? Or 3?
Because then we have 2 different things with different names. So suddenly you can start referring to these releases with different names. And you know, it actually, it's not just a a quirk. It's actually a thing that is differentiatable between LTS releases.
Yeah.
And perhaps you're right. Perhaps we get lots of confusion about it. But perhaps also it makes them, it raises the profile of them, makes them much more clear that they are a big deal. It gives people a alternative, friendly way of referring to them. Or maybe it is just confusing.
But we don't really know that for sure until we actually do have to. Right now, it's just a theoretical level.
I mean, I'm not really so convinced, given the fact that no one really refers to V4 as Argon, as far as I know, or as far as I've come across, really. So
I've seen
Well, they
it.
do,
Docker.
as James said, Docker and NVM.
I've seen it in particular with Docker. I've seen Docker files with Docker.
It also gives us a non-Boolean way of referring to LTS in the our index.json and index.tab. So when you're looking for whether something is LTS or not, there's a column, and instead of just saying yes, this is LTS, it actually has the code name in it. So you know there's no LTS, there's blank for a bunch of them because they're not LTS, and then there's this code name in a bunch of them. And so far we have Argon in there, and so you know which line is just from that one column, and then there'll be 2 variants in that one column, and you'll be able to see without having to cross-reference which LTS branch it is.
I guess I also don't see the harm. Like, I don't have a really strong feeling one way or the other, but I just don't see how it hurts to have it. So, if it does, some people think it is useful, then why not?
Yeah.
well, the harm is if like if like a subset of people starts referring to all the releases that they use, which might be LTS releases, with the code names, and then everyone outside of that doesn't know what those are. I mean, that's significant community harm there, in my opinion.
Except in all our communications about our versions, we put the code name in there. Even now, you go through the Node.js blog, even release notes and security updates. Whenever we mention version 4, we have Argon in there as well, and we will do the same for version 6.
It also gives us a clear signal when a particular stable goes into LTS, because anything earlier than 4.2 doesn't carry that label, right? And those aren't LTS. Right? I mean, it essentially is a Boolean, right? I mean, we could have an LTS, true, false, but just having that label, I mean, it's a little more user friendly. I mean, I'm not jumping up and down saying, okay, we absolutely have to have this. I'm just saying, I can definitely see the argument on some people.
Well, I agree that we need to have an indicator, and the suggestion was to just change it to a Boolean, since that's how it is mostly used. Or at least in any checks that you would do for it, that's how it's used.
I've not encountered people suggesting that it's strange or problematic for them at all. That it's a weird thing that we do. As far as I'm aware, people are accepting it and not questioning its utility.
Jeremiah, are you aware of any cases where finding that label has been a problem?
Not really, no.
Do you object to us just going a second release, second LTS with a label, and comparing afterwards to see if it's actually helpful with the two different instances?
I mean, I guess go ahead.
I haven't been keeping up the notes on this, Jeremiah. I'm going to write up the notes here in a few minutes. If you can double check those afterwards, and just make sure I've represented your thoughts, or if you want to put your thoughts in the minutes. Okay. I just want to make sure I accurately represent your objections to it. Okay, so if we go ahead with the name, does anyone have preferences? Miles, I know you said something that's as simple as possible. Out of the ones that Rod posted, here, where is it? There's 118. Code name. Are any of these your preferred?
I think boron is empirically like the easiest to pronounce. It has the least syllables and also the least letters.
Okay. Yep, I agree. Michael, Miles, and Rod, do you have preferences?
What
It
was the
actually kind of
issue number? Just so I can look it up.
like argon and boron also sort of they almost sound like they're related, so it's not bad that respect either.
Is that like too close then? I don't
Mm,
know.
I don't know that they're too close. It just seems like a natural. Okay, first one was argon, second one boron.
Next thing you know, it's everything that's dash on
Yeah.
the element from the pure table.
Cargon. Yeah.
So the process that we had before was to just narrow the list down and then put them up for collaborators to vote on.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to knock some names out here.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up. Let's go ahead and do that. Ryan, which ones of here do we absolutely not want? Would anybody actually want barium? Or berkelium? That one's probably a good candidate for removing.
If it has more than 3 syllables,
Yeah. I'm copying these into the minute stock, by the way, so we can kind of indicate the status.
I think I knock out the ones that have they're more than a couple of syllables, but also have awkward spelling that just not that natural. And with berkelium is one, even beryllium is a bit awkward.
It seems to me like barium, bismuth, and boron are kind of the easiest ones, other than bromine, but you gave it a strong -1 because of the origin, which I've not looked up again.
Comes from the word stench.
Mm.
I mean, there's other actual reasons for us to want to not use that one. The fact that it starts pro is probably
Not for the best.
So we're talking about taking berkelium off. Just strike. Just strike. I'll just put a minus sign in front of it. Beryllium, no. Bromine, no. Did we say barium? Yes, no. What do you think of those?
Which one did you just ask about? Barium?
Yeah, barium.
Yeah, it seems easy enough to pronounce.
We have barium, bismuth, bohrium, and boron.
If we were to strike another one, I'd strike bismuth. But simply just because the name is slightly awkward to spell and pronounce, but only slightly.
I can see that. Okay. Bohrium is the spelling on it is a bit awkward, right? I mean, for non-native speakers.
That's true, and even for native speakers, it's
Yeah.
not something you wouldn't spell it that way if you were told the word.
No, I'm
You don't know
definitely
anything
thinking
about
the
it.
same thing.
So that gives us barium, bismuth, and boron. Those are 3 choices.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And I will open the issue to select the name. I'll open that on Node.js Node.
So if you lock it, then only collaborators can comment. Then you could have one comment for each name, and then get them to emoji reaction, thumbs up,
Oh.
their vote.
Good. Yeah.
It seems like a good idea. Although, does locking it mean they? I don't think that locks it to only collaborators to use the emoji votes.
Oh, really?
Probably, yeah.
But it's
So that might not work.
Is there some? I could look to see if there's some kind of poll site or something. I don't know. I don't know what we can do there. But I think locking it is a good thing. I don't want an endless conversation for all time of.
You could easily, I don't know if you could set up a doodle poll to.
I think it'd end up being more trouble than it's worth because we'd end up having to lock down the authentication to only people.
No, that's true. Yeah, okay.
So. GitHub needs to find a better way of doing this. But I do like the idea of voting via the emoji. We'll just have to maybe. I mean, do we care if non-collaborators weigh in?
No, but if it's coming down to a count, like collaborators should be the ones in control of this.
I guess if you made it, could you make it? We make it a private repo that only collaborators have access to, and then I'd have to assume that nobody else could get in to vote.
Can we? I'm just trying to research here the locking. It doesn't say that you can't put reactions, but it does say that you can't add
I'm pretty sure you can still put reactions. I think I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
We could just ask. Please don't. Yeah, I don't know.
We can try it. I mean, I'll lock an issue and then I'll see if we can put if somebody slips up. I think you can just send another repo somewhere. I still think that even if they can, if we need to go break it down and count it, we can find a way to break down and count the emojis because it lists. I believe doesn't the API actually list who all reacted to it?
Well, it does in the mouse over, so I assume it's in the HTML as well.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. We can try it. If it becomes a problem, we can find a better way to vote. Sound good?
To me.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure that we don't lose this thread, though, about revisiting this to see if it actually is useful later on. Right? Once we have two, so why don't we open an issue now, revisit later?
And one issue with the voting in it, and say if people have thoughts about the utility of this, please go and comment over there. So just so that we make sure anybody out there whose objections we're not collecting now, we give them a obvious place to go.
Yep. Okay. So why don't we open an issue to revisit this and direct for comments. I'm going to leave a note here, a little placeholder. Documents. Okay. All right. All right. Anything more on the naming issue? We've only got a few more minutes, so.
Let's move on to the other stuff.
Next one will be slowing down changes before we go to I think we've had a slowdown anyway in V6, just so because everyone's been on vacation and they're distracted the past few weeks. But it's really comes down, we're supposed to go to LTS in October. That's just over, just under 2 months. All right, so we want to have an explicit slowdown in landing things into V6, or we just keep going like we are and just cut it at a specific point. I know, Jeremiah, you've been the one primarily handling the V6 releases, so what do you think?
I have been.
I thought, well, you've been more involved
I
in it.
guess so. What was the question exactly?
On V6, before it goes into LTS,
Yeah.
should we slow down changes that are being back-ported into it, like fewer some minors, fewer things that are potentially breaking, right?
Well, okay. If anything's potentially breaking, it should not land on V6. I don't think there's a huge problem because that's mostly for. I mean, LTS is mostly so that once those things are locked in, from that point onwards, we don't make anything that could be like pretty much remotely breaking. But I don't think there should be too much of a problem up to V6. I don't know, unless. Yeah, I can't really see that like ramping up a huge amount. I think people are more concerned about majors, and that's where we need to like look out for.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing the reverse problem here, which is if we're holding too much on master, then we increase the risk of V7 going out with failures. I'm really worried about that with V7 because I don't think V6 was handled all that well, and we're still picking up the pieces from that. And I'd like to see us invest a bit more in making V7 solid.
Well, yeah, and that's really the other thread that I started. V6 was our first experiment of cutting a major directly off of master, and that was we're still dealing with that. So it's like, yeah, let's not do that again. So just cutting the V7 branch a month in advance and then treating it like a stable before the release, I think is a good thing. The other thing that we have to consider is for V6, we have things like the FS reverts. We still have to do land the deprecation warning on the things like the no callbacks for the FS async methods, that kind of thing. So I think there are still some
fairly significant changes, we need to make sure land well in advance of it's actually going to LTS. So, I mean, I don't know.
I think maybe a better question here is how can we increase the sense of not urgency but seriousness as we get close to LTS amongst the collaborator group. That this is a period where we really need to start paying attention to stability rather than just, it's not. It shouldn't be just business as usual and we pick up the pieces as we put out the releases. It should be, hey, we're coming to a really an apex point here. Let's focus on eyes on the prize kind of thing.
Right.
Are there ways that we can do that?
No.
So yeah, I think I started the issue about V7. I think it's important that we take time to at least stop any major changes. Like the biggest stuff that bit us with V6 was landing a whole bunch of Semver major changes right before the release. I think similarly, slowing down questionable changes onto V6 before the release is a good idea. I think a month seems like a pretty reasonable timeline for that. Do we have an exact date that we're looking at for the bump yet, or are we still waiting to find out some stuff about V8, the V8 version that we want on 7?
I think that's still kind of an open question, and whether when the 5.2 will be ready or not. And that's supposed to hit sometime in October. Right?
Yeah. I think it was like the third week of October or something along those lines. I think it's like Rod said. It's just we want to somehow be more focused on stability, whatever that means for not just for 6, but also because it'll affect 7.
I do like the idea of branching V7 a month ahead of time, and then that actually gives us a gateway for getting major changes in. We can actually say no more majors. A month ahead, no more majors unless you can really make a really good case for it.
Right.
That's the only thing
Like
is
changing V8.
Yeah, except for V8 because that's the one we want to do afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, so the timing on that really sucks because I wanted to make sure we at least had a good release candidate cycle, and if 5.2 is not going to come out until the third week of October, that's really going to kill that.
Are we able to start working with a pre-release 5.2 a month ahead?
Yeah, like basically take 5.2 when it's not stable, just when it's in beta.
And push that into our as a pre-release. I'm not sure we'd be able to call it a release candidate.
But I think that brings up, Rich was kind of bringing this up too, that if we're expecting to land more stuff, maybe using the term release candidate isn't the appropriate term.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But it seems to me at the very least, if we land the pre-release V8 5.2 into 7 a month in advance, a week or two in, if there's a ton of pain, and it's not just pain because something in V8 is broken, we'll hopefully be able to find that early and maybe decide it's not worth it. Or alternatively, we'll see that everything just kind of works, and then it will be an easy decision.
The thing is, does that sort of violate what we've set our expectations for a stable?
Well, I mean, technically, at that point, it's not as stable yet. It's
right.
So we haven't actually cut the release. So
I would expect the V8 team the Node V8 team to be opening a V8 5.2 branch soon, which should have this all on it. We can ask them to get going.
They not have one already?
I think they have one.
I'm not seeing one. I'm seeing V8 5.1.
No, 5.2 is already out there.
Yeah,
it's out there, but I'm not seeing one on our repo.
Oh, on our repo, they may not have done that.
I could have sworn there was one, but
in the past,
I'm not seeing it either. I'm seeing the 5.1.
I think everyone's focused on trying to get 5.1 into version 6. which is
That's
still
actually the
being
next
resolved.
item on the agenda.
Okay. All right, so we're over time. May you all have a few minutes more to keep talking?
I can probably stick around for a couple minutes.
Okay. I can't stick around for a long time because I am late for another call. But I have maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, can we move to talking about 5.1 on V6 then, really quickly?
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I created, before heading on vacation a week ago, a test CI job in Canary in the Gold Mine for doing ABI tests. It allows you to specify a base version and a testing version. It will build the test version, run npm install with the test version, then build the other version and run npm test with the newer version. The idea being that if there are any ABI breakages, we should see them when running npm test with the other binary. So I was not able to test v6 properly yet due to the fact that npm had been broken on master last week. It is fixed now, so I can do some more tests this week. A couple of things that are still I need in order to move forward. One would be a list of binary modules that we should test against. We have some modules that involve binaries, and I was able to do a proof of concept that it will work. But I do think that we need a pretty extensive list of at least 10 to 15 highly dependent on binary modules to test. The other thing that I would love to see is the V851 branch is almost 700 commits behind master. I'm not sure where exactly it is relative to V6, but it would be good, and I can ask the V8 team about this, to put together a pull request against V6 with all the necessary backport commits to land 5.1 with no ABI breakages, because then I can start smoke testing that.
How can what's the best way for us to see the work you've done in Sitcom and Jenkins and verify that it's ticking all the boxes that we think it need to be ticked here? Do we need to look at the code, or is there some sort of process that I can see?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go through and take a look at the CI job if you'd like. I mean, there's a new flag in Sitcom now that essentially just allows you to pass an extra path, and that path gets shimmed in when npm test is called. So it's pretty blunt and not too fancy as far as how that works. I have some CI jobs that I've run, and I pasted the output in there. I could run a couple to just show you examples of the latest 4 against the latest 6. Most of the problems that we end up getting are actually errors being thrown between different node module versions being exposed, and that being an error, and then it kind of errors out before that. But we could do something purposely break the ABI and make sure that turns red, to make sure that this is working the way that we're expecting.
That
That
sounds
would give
like a
a
lot
preference.
better of an idea, yes.
Do you print out the version of Node before it's tested with, so that you verify it's actually picking up the right version with the path changes?
I believe that it does. I can change that into Canary in the Gold Mine to be more explicit in the logging for that. That shouldn't be too difficult. So I could set it up so that if you have that flag, it will actually output the node version. Yeah, I can make that more explicit. As it is right now, I was able to verify by actually just looking at some of the test results. I'm going to see if I can dig one up here. No, it's not this one. I think it was build 9. So yeah,
Break
this
API,
one.
you could just take one of the Node core APIs and switch arguments,
Hmm.
over there.
It's not a bad idea. So here's one that was running just 447 against 631. So the base version, you'll see. Oh, I think that one was canceled. That was a bad example. Here it is again, where it actually ran. Just pasting that in. And so you can see the base version, that's the version that npm install is run with. And there were some, unfortunately, false breakages in here because it turns out that WS and VinylFS had some problems. But here, if we look at level DB, and I can post in the output here, we can see the output on Fedora where it just says module version mismatch, expected 48 got 46. So this just like threw, early on in a very obvious way. Serial port also had the same module mismatch, and that was like what I took as just proof that the install is happening with one version and the test is happening with another version. But we need to have
for some of these that use Node pre-jip or pre-build, you need to pass a flag, I think, to say you need to like rebuild or some flag to stop it from downloading the binary.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so that would probably be useful as well. Then that probably needs to get added. We can add that as a flag. Maybe offline, if someone wants to volunteer to pair with me on this a little bit, who knows JIP a bit better. I don't think it should take a ton of time to get me the information that I need to move forward more by myself.
Do you just need that command line or something else?
I think just like pairing on it for like 20 or 30 minutes and just kind of like a more in-depth version of what we're doing right now would be good.
Yeah,
Just
I think
like
I
a
know the
sanity
command
check.
line. I know the command line Rod was talking about. I could get you that, but I don't think I qualify as the knowing JIP better on that. So on that front, I'm not so sure.
I guess Miles just trying to ping me on IRC. And,
Okay. Rod, if you want to ping me on IRC with just like hours that are good for you, then I can make sure that I ping you within those hours.
it's pretty much any time from now and later to later in the middle of the day, which I suspect is getting a bit late for you.
Yeah, my schedule is a little different now. But so, I mean, timeline-wise, we're at the beginning of August. If we want to land 5.1, then we probably want to do that by like September, right? Does that
Agreed.
seem...
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds about good.
So I feel very confident that we will be able to have this tool working in a meaningful way and have some examples that we can look at, if not for the next LTS meeting, but for the following one.
We're every 3 weeks.
Have we switched to every 3? I thought we were still every 2.
I can't remember. I was just, yeah.
I thought we were every 3 weeks, but I just noticed it come up now and again in my calendar.
Yeah, me too. I mean, maybe we should just agree to have one at the end of August to see where we're at on that front.
Mm-hmm. So just for to be clear, I'm heading on vacation again. The last week of August, I'm heading off to Iceland to speak at JSConf Iceland. In the LTS working group meeting on the 22nd, I'm going to be in a van off somewhere chasing the Northern Lights. But I can try to get stuff in before that.
Okay, sounds good. I think are we all done now?
Yeah, it seems good to me.
Okay. Talk to you guys later.